Okay. So I think we can start.
Okay.
If you want. Just look at that. Yeah, great. So you can just talk to me. It's okay.
Okay,
It's
sounds
okay.
good.
So if I can ask you, so your motherland is Xinjiang, is that right?
Yes, we call it East Turkestan. Xinjiang has a very colonial connotation.
Okay,
So-
okay. Eastern Turkestan.
East Turkestan.
East Turkestan. Okay. So you born there?
Yes, I was born in Urumqi, the capital of East Turkestan.
Urumqi.
Yeah.
Okay, okay. And your family is still there? Or-
Yes, a lot of my relatives are back home. My immediate family is, however, in Canada.
Okay, okay. And why you are here in Prague today?
I'm in Prague because we're actually hosting an exhibition, a photo exhibition displaying some of the files from the Xinjiang police files that were leaked last year, with images of the victims of the genocide who have been interned in camps. And then, of course, we also have some meetings with parliament members at the Czech Parliament, as well as tonight's event at the American Center, a discussion on the Uyghur issue.
Okay, and what is today's situation in your country? Describe it somehow.
The situation is actually very dire. Since 2017, there has been mass internment camps that were built all around the region. So this is a policy that was implemented by the Chinese government over the years, especially with Xi Jinping coming to power and consolidating all the power. And over the years, he's also implemented a series of legislation that permitted this mass surveillance network and also this system to be built. So the regulations on the de-extremifications and the counterterrorism law that came into effect as well in 2016. And since then, there have been at least 3 million of Uyghurs and Turkic people arbitrarily detained in concentration camps that the Chinese government refers to as re-education centers, where detainees are detained only for their ethnic and religious identity, and they're subjected to all forms of torture inside the camps. Women detainees are subjected to sexual abuses, including rape and forced sterilization and all sorts of other humiliations as well. And outside of the camp system, there's also a wide network of surveillance system. There's also forced labor across different industries. Women are also subjected to forced birth control policies in an attempt to really decrease the Uyghur population in the region, especially in the southern parts. So the population has significantly dropped between 2015 and 2018. And like Uyghur and Turkic women are subjected to forced sterilization, abortions, and all sorts of procedures to prevent birth. The Uyghur children are also being separated from their families and sent to boarding schools where they're stripped away from their Uyghur identity and molded into a unique Han Chinese identity, as well as the destruction of Uyghur culture by targeting our elites, so cultural figures, intellectuals, scholars, professors. So people of influence in the Uyghur society have been the first group of people and individuals that have been targeted in this repression. What the Chinese government is trying to do is really to break Uyghurs from their, break them spiritually, but also just to eradicate their culture, their way of living, and to also prevent future generations from identifying as Uyghurs and identifying with their culture and traditions.
Just separate them from from their roots.
Yes, exactly.
Working like this. And that exhibition, is it the part of that orders from Communistic Party that documents, the exhibition of documents, is it part of that issue? How old are the documents?
So these are leaked documents that came directly from the central government. So of course they were classified documents, but somehow leaked through some sources. So you can actually, a lot of people have verified that information, and it's basically notices or when people were arrested, and there's official sentencing, official documents, signing. For example, some people signing onto forced confessions, basically, but also some of the interrogations that they have received, but also you have very clear indication of the sentencing, the charges, and also the length of the sentence. So for example, some people have been sentenced to 14 years, but all of the charges are not traditional charges like any criminal offense. It's basically all terrorism related charges, which means that of course the Chinese government is also using the existing legislation to criminalize any behavior that might be considered as slightly religious.
Okay, and do you feel some changes in international society if they understand better what's happened today in Xinjiang, and do you feel some help, or is it changing?
Of course, I think there's been a lot of development over the past few years as more evidence was available. A lot of scrutiny on China, especially at the United Nations and multilateral spaces, where, for example, in 2018, the Chinese government was reviewed by the UN Committee on the Elimination of Racial Discrimination, and the committee found that at that time, over 1 million of Uyghurs were arbitrarily detained in the context of, counterterrorism efforts by the Chinese government. So from that moment on, there was a lot of media coverage on the issue, and there was a lot of international attention. And since then, that's just increased, and we've obtained even more evidence. So I think I would definitely say that there's been a pretty large amount of not only evidence but also coverage on the issue, and coverage on the broad range of violations. So not only the camps, but also like all of the abuses that I've described earlier were also reported by journalists, by scholars, by UN committees, and of course last year the most important report came out, which was by the office of the former High Commissioner under Michelle Bachelet's leadership. Her office published the first independent report by the UN on the situation on the ground for Uyghurs. So I think that there has been a lot, and of course 11 national parliaments, senates around the world have recognized the Uyghur genocide officially in parliaments or senates. The US government is the first government to call it as a genocide. The Independent Uyghur Tribunal judged that these crimes amounted to genocide, crimes against humanity, and torture in December 2021. There's been a series of measures adopted. There's been legislation adopted, for example, the Uyghur Forced Labor Prevention Act in the US that was adopted in 2021 as well. So I do think that there's been a lot that has been done on the issue, but I think we're still very far from meaningful accountability on China at the UN and in international spaces.
Okay. So maybe only is the question about your safety, or how do you feel? You are abroad, but still you are involving in this publicly speaking. Do you feel some kind of pressure, or?
Yes, that's definitely a valid question. I think for Uyghur activists, safety is a bit of a luxury for us because we never feel safe anywhere. Even in democratic countries, we know that Chinese long arm is getting to us in one way or another. We've been followed, monitored, intimidated in the heart of of Europe, in the UN. So I think it's nothing surprising for us. We are used to that. We know what the risks are when you engage in activism, against China. Chinese government it's a big government. It's a big power, and they can really retaliate against activists and their family members as soon as you speak out against the regime. So I think. It's definitely something that's in the back of our minds every day when we carry out our activism, and we can't not think about it because it's constantly there. The risks are constantly there, and it's something that we manage. But I do think that this is very pervasive, and it has a lot of impact in your personal and professional life. So a lot of us pay a very high price to continue doing what we're doing.
Okay, can you describe, do you have some experiences with this, like personally? Can you describe something what happened to you, or some cases you know about?
Absolutely. I mean, the smallest example is that we're constantly monitored online or offline. We have agents or people who follow us in different countries, in different events. They come to spy on us. The Chinese government sends them to spy on us, on our activism, the events that we're organizing, to also infiltrate communities in which we work, and to try to really threaten us in a way, to intimidate us. I've been followed, and my photo was taken without my consent inside the United Nations. That happened just last month in Geneva when I was there for some meetings. And this happens constantly. The government, the Chinese mission in Geneva sends official communications to different missions in Geneva to prevent us from meeting them, calling us terrorists. They defame us in the media, defame us everywhere. They also target our relatives back home. I'm also aware that my relatives are being harassed back home because of the advocacy that I'm doing here. Although I have no contact at all with my family members back home. I haven't spoken to them in over 6 years, but somehow they still get, to them. So, these are some of the examples, but of course there are even more extreme cases. For example, with our president Dolkun Issa, who's had an Interpol Red Notice for over 20 years. And that prevented him from entering many countries, being arrested and detained and interrogated at many country borders. And fortunately, his Interpol Red Notice was deleted in 2018 after years of, fighting back and advocating for the deletion. But the Chinese government will use any methods to really prevent us from speaking out. But I think one thing is clear is that this is not going to work, and another thing is that we must oppose any forms of transnational repression by the Chinese government, especially when it happens in free democratic countries.
And if I can ask you the last question, what do you will do, or I don't know how can I say it, but what you will do if you will be today in your country and in normal situation?
You mean
if
in the context of no genocide, if things were normal?
Yeah, if you will be back at home, what will be your daily life? How does it looks like? Or
I grew up there. It's there is nothing more beautiful than living in your own country, living in your own homeland, where your ancestors have lived, where all your family members are, where you identify with the people and you feel like you belong. So I think that's a luxury that I almost cannot imagine at the moment, because it's so far, it looks so far, but I know that we'll get there one day, and this is what we're striving for as well. And I think, I mean, if you ask me what is the first thing that I'm going to do, is just, you know, be with my family. And I haven't seen them, I haven't heard about them in so long. I think the first thing is that, you know, I'll just hug them and tell them how much I miss them, and how much I love them, because it's unimaginable today that this very basic right of speaking to your family members has been taken away from millions of people, in a time where communication has never been so easy. We're still being prevented from getting, you know, information from our relatives.
Okay, and do you have something what is, according to you, good to say or necessary to say, or what you want to say to people here or international community? So
yeah, I mean, I think to the Czech people, I would just say to, you know, support this issue, to maybe learn more about it, because Czech people know what communism is. They've lived under communism for so long, and they understand the struggles of it. They understand what authoritarianism means, and the restriction on your personal and collective freedoms. So it's understanding that, and being able to stand up for people who are oppressed elsewhere, knowing that we're all human beings, and that at some point in the history, maybe not to that scale, but some people have felt the way we feel today. So I think it's just standing in solidarity with the Uyghurs, and to also make better choices in terms of, you know, when you purchase goods, ensuring that you don't buy products that are made with Uyghur forced labor, for example, especially in, you know, clothing, knowing that cotton, 25% of global cotton comes from the Uyghur region, and that is tainted with forced labor. So just making better choices, conscious choices, and educating yourself, and also talking to people around you about this issue, talking to your elected parliament members, elected officials, to ensure that they can bring it up, you know, in the political sphere, to strive for change.
Okay, and is some tip or a website or something like this for people who can check which goods are made by forced labor in?
Yeah, so there is a database that was created by Jewish World Watch, so it's jewishworldwatch.org, and you can basically, they have a database, and you can basically see all of the companies that are involved or linked to Uyghur forced labor. So that's a good list. And then of course people can also visit EndUyghurForcedLabor.org, which is a coalition that we have working to eliminate forced labor from global supply chains. And we've also listed some brands on that website.
Okay. So thank you very much for the interview, and we will see each other.
Thank you.